The Kentucky breeding cabin, found in 1890, was where the Inbred brothers kept their three sisters chained up in the attic. Eastern Kentucky's Black Mars Holler. A person who is taking the census sees a pale face in a high window, four brothers who talk as one, a cabin that smells like lye and is quiet. Then, iron bolts on a door that can only be opened from the outside. There are 3 women, 11 twisted children, and a leather-bound book that shows 6 generations of blood folding back on itself. A family tree that goes in a circle like a noose. The oldest sister kept track of the marks on the attic wall, which were thousands of scratches in the dark. Her testimony would later show how cold and planned the horror her own parents planned. A burned page, a census report, and a justice who wouldn't look away were the things that finally brought their secret to light. The brothers were put on trial, and 2 of them were hanged. But before the rope got tight, the oldest person stood in court and said something that no one could unhear. So, who burns the evidence when the law is done? And does fire really clean up what isolation kept safe for so long? It's the year 1890. The fog in eastern Kentucky doesn't go away. It stays like a judgment, thick and cold, making the valleys into wells of white silence. A single piece of paper sits on Circuit Justice Elias Thorne's desk, which is already full of land deeds and tax disputes. This is a census report that a young man named Abel Fry wrote by hand. It shouldn't be anything special. But Thorne, a methodical former clerk from Lexington who thinks that the truth is in the margins of official records, has read it 3 times now, and each time he gets more and more uneasy. The report talks about a property in Black Mars Holler, a valley so far away that even traveling preachers stay away from it after dark. The Rodenbeck brothers, 4 of them, wouldn't let Fry into their cabin. They stood shoulder to shoulder in the doorway, like a wall of flesh. When asked, they gave names: Silas, Malachi, Hezekiah, and Jubel. Fry wrote that their eyes were cold and empty, and they spoke in turns as if they had practiced. The census taker said he couldn't confirm the number of people living there, which hurt his professional pride. Then there was the detail that made Thorne put a red X on the file. Fry had seen a pale, haunted face in a high attic window for a split second before one of the brothers stepped in front of him and blocked his view completely. Thorne takes out a second document from his drawer. It's a business ledger he borrowed from the general store in the closest settlement. The Rodenbecks go there twice a year to trade, always in the fall, and always without talking. They sell hand-carved things and food that looks too good to be true, like apples with no spots and turnips the size of a child's head. Jessup, the store owner, wrote down in his own hand that the brothers never brought womenfolk, never talked about family, and flinched when a customer's baby cried near the counter. But now, it's the amounts that are bothering Thorne. The Rodenbecks bought a lot of lye in the last 5 years, more than any farm could use. It was enough to strip a body to bone or scrub a floor until it bled white. They bought lamp oil, iron polish, and heavy iron bolts, the kind of bolts used to keep livestock safe or keep wolves out of a root cellar. There are no longer any wolves in Black Mars Holler. This is something that everyone knows. As the autumn night falls outside his window, Thorne turns on a lamp. He opens a thin folder that only has one testimonial in it. It is dated from the previous year, but is not signed. A traveling preacher who was passing through the area had tried to visit the Rodenbeck cabin to give spiritual advice. The brothers met him on the porch, which was as clean as a church floor, and politely told him he couldn't come in. It felt like a threat. The preacher later told his wife, who wrote it down and sent it to the county clerk, that he felt a godless chill coming from that house, something that had nothing to do with the weather. He said that the brothers moved together. Their gestures were the same, and their voices were flat and rehearsed, as if they were one creature with 4 faces instead of 4 men. He never went back to that hollow, and he told the people in his church to stay away from it too. Thorne lays out the 3 papers in front of him like cards in a bad hand of fate: a refusal to take the census, too many purchases of lye and iron, a preacher turned away by men who moved as one, and a pale face in an attic window that was gone before it could be confirmed. These things aren't crimes yet, but they are holes in the record where there should be answers. Thorne has always thought that when evil happens, it leaves behind a receipt, a witness, or a page that has been torn up and thrown away. He runs his finger along the edge of Fry's report and stops at the part that talks about how the brothers' cold, uniform stare looked. The law doesn't act on fear, but Thorne has learned that fear is often truth waiting to be proven. He writes in his personal case log, with dark, careful ink, Rodenbeck family, Black Mars Holler, marked for personal review, suspected concealment of occupants, evidence of isolation and evasion, truth believed, deliberately hidden. Thorne closes the file and puts it on top of the others, but he doesn't put it away. Instead, he keeps it on his desk, where it can be seen and is always there. He will ride to Black Mars Holler himself, pretending to be there to settle a land dispute. There, he will find the truth that 4 brothers are keeping locked up behind iron bolts. The fog outside his window gets thicker, but Thorne turns on another lamp. He is a man of paper and ink, and he knows that somewhere in that hollow is a record waiting to be read. It was written in chains, in silence, and on the pale, haunted face of someone who has been erased from the living ledger. Thorne rides toward Black Mars Holler on a cold November morning. The fog is so thick that his horse moves through it like a ship through milk. He has a leather satchel with a surveyor's map, a land dispute claim he made up, and a small notebook bound in brown cloth where he will write down everything he sees. The reason is simple. The Rodenbecks and a property owner next door who doesn't exist don't agree on a boundary. Thorne knows the brothers won't check this out. Men who hide don't ask questions that make people look closer. As he goes down into the hollow, the trail gets narrower and the trees get closer, their branches looking like bones and dripping. There are no birds singing here. There is complete silence, except for the soft sound of his horse's hooves on the ground. The fog makes the Rodenbeck cabin look like a hole in the ground. It is bigger than Thorne thought it would be. 2 stories of dark wood, with a steep roof and a single stone chimney. The porch is swept clean, but not in a normal way. It looks like someone scrubs it every day with the same lye they buy in bulk from Jessup's store. Thorne gets off his horse and ties it to a post that has been worn smooth over the years. The door opens before he can knock. The 4 brothers are all standing in the doorway, shoulder to shoulder, just like Abel Fry said they would. They don't say hello to him. They don't smile. Silas, the oldest, steps forward first. His face is thin and blank, and his eyes are the color of dirty ice. He asks Thorne what he wants in a flat, careful voice, as if he has practiced each word 1,000 times. Thorne explains the land dispute while slowly opening the surveyor's map. He looks at their faces to see if they look confused or worried, but they don't. Malachi nods once. Hezekiah crosses his arms. Jubel doesn't move at all. Silas looks at the map without blinking, then gives it back and starts to recite their property lines from memory, his words clear and practiced. Thorne writes down what he hears, but his eyes are moving around the porch, the windows, and the edges of the clearing. Everything is too tidy. The census record says there are people living there, but there are no toys in the yard, no clothes hanging on a line, and no signs of women or children. The only noise is the soft creaking of the porch boards under their feet and the low hum of the wind blowing through the hollow. Thorne's eyes drift to a fire pit near the cabin's side as Silas talks. The ground around it is blackened and worn down, but something white catches his eye. A piece of paper that is half buried in the ash. He asks Silas a question about water rights, which takes his mind off of things. As the brothers turn to point to a creek far away, Thorne steps 2 steps closer to the fire pit. The edges of the paper are burned and brittle, but some of it is still whole. He can see lines, circles, and names written in a small, old-fashioned way. He hasn't touched it yet. He doesn't have to. He knows what it is. The brothers finish explaining and turn back to him at the same time, their movements perfectly in sync, which makes Thorne's skin crawl. He thanks them, folds up his map, and asks if they need any more help from the county. Silas says they don't. He says they are men who are self-sufficient, fear God, and stay to themselves. They don't ask for anything from the world outside their hollow. He sounds religious, almost peaceful, but he never stops looking at Thorne's face. The other brothers don't say anything. They just stand there, breathing in time and watching. Thorn tips his hat and walks back to his horse. He doesn't look at the fire pit again, but when he gets on his horse and turns it toward the trail, he lets his boot drag a little, scuffing ash and dirt over the corner of the paper that is showing so it won't blow away before he gets back. That night, Thorn rides back to his office with only one deputy he trusts, a man named Callum, who doesn't ask any questions. They walk up to the fire pit without making a sound. Thorn kneels down and uses a thin blade to pick up the burned page from the ash. It rips a little, but not too much. He takes it back to his office, wraps it in oilcloth, and with the help of 3 lamps, he and Callum flatten it on his desk. It's a hand-drawn family tree. The ink has faded, but you can still read it. There are 2 names at the top, Jedediah and Azuba Rodenbeck. Their 4 sons and 3 daughters are below them, connected by a single line, but the lines don't end there. They go down in circles and then back up, linking brothers and sisters in a web of ink that makes Thorn's hands shake. He doesn't know what the symbols mean, but the date and the symbol on each pairing are clear. This is not a family tree. It is a map of planned incest between generations, a plan for sin carried out with the same care as a holy ritual. Callum, a man who has seen death and violence in these mountains, steps back from the desk and crosses himself. Thorn stays still. He looks at the page and the names of the 3 sisters, Tamar, Orlia, and Elps, and the lines that connect them to their brothers. He counts 6 generations, and each one folds back into itself like a snake eating its own tail. This is not a crime of love or insanity. This is a system that has been passed down and kept safe. Thorn writes one sentence in his case log, his handwriting sharp and angry. Evidence of premeditated multi-generational incest. Warrant required immediately. Rescue operation, not investigation. He now knows that the pale face in the attic window was not a ghost. There was a prisoner. The truth is waiting to be unbolted in that cabin, behind iron bolts and a wall of silence. It takes Thorn 3 weeks to get his warrant. During that time, he doesn't sleep well and can't stop seeing the charred family tree's looping lines. Whitfield, the county judge, has been in charge of these mountain districts for 20 years. He reads the evidence twice before signing his name. He writes in the margin of the warrant, in handwriting that shakes a little, that this is the first case in his career where he is more afraid of what the law will find than what it won't. On a gray December morning, Thorn rides back to Black Mars Holler with Deputy Callum, a man whose silence is worth more than most men's words. They don't bring any extra officers or people. Thorn knows that whatever is in that cabin will need witnesses with steady nerves, not a lot of them. The fog is less thick today, and as they get closer to the property, Thorn can see Hezekiah and Jubal working near a fence line at the edge of the clearing. They don't look up when the horses get close, but Thorn can tell they heard them because their hands stop moving. Thorn gets off his horse and walks forward with the warrant folded up in his coat pocket. He calls the brothers by name, and his voice carries through the cold air. They all turn at the same time, their faces blank and their eyes showing no surprise or fear. Thorn makes his point clear by holding up the warrant so they can see the judge's seal. He tells them that the county court has sent him to check out the house and make sure that the people who live there are who they say they are. Hezekiah slowly and carefully wipes his hands on his pants. It looks like Jubal is listening to a voice that only he can hear. Then Hezekiah speaks in a low, steady voice and says they do not agree to let them in. Thorn was ready for this. He opens the warrant and reads the legal language that makes their agreement useless. The brothers stay still. They don't fight. They just stand there and watch Thorn and Callum walk by them and into the cabin. The door is open. Thorn opens the door and steps inside, with Callum right behind him. The smell hits them right away. Lye, which is so strong it burns the back of the throat, mixed with something else that Thorn can't quite put his finger on. The main floor of the cabin is a strange mix of order and chaos. The table, made of wood, is scrubbed clean. The floorboards shine like they've been polished every day. There are no personal things lying around, like clothes, books, or papers. The fireplace is clean and cold. Thorn slowly walks through the room, opening cabinets and looking in corners. There are provisions, like sacks of cornmeal, jars of preserved vegetables, and smoked meat hanging from hooks, but no women or children. There were no dresses, small shoes, toys, cradles, or anything else that would show that there was life outside of the four brothers. The silence inside the cabin is thicker than the silence outside, like water pressing against the ears. Callum walks to the back of the room, his boots creaking on the floor, and then he stops. He is looking up. Thorn looks where he is looking and sees it. Dark stains on the ceiling boards that look like oil seeping through wood and spreading out in uneven circles. The stains are old and thick, like the kind that come from being wet for a long time, or something worse. A narrow door with an iron frame is built into the ceiling right above them. Thorn moves closer and sees what makes his blood run cold. 3 heavy iron bolts, each as thick as a man's thumb, are driven through the frame from the outside. There is no handle on this side of the door, so you can't open it from above. This door is not meant to keep things out. It is meant to hold something in. Callum looks at Thorn, whose face is pale, and asks in a voice that is barely above a whisper if they should call for more men. Thorn shakes his head. He can't wait. He can't leave and come back tomorrow without knowing what those bolts mean. He pulls out his gun not because he thinks there will be violence, but because he needs something to hold. He gives Callum a nod. The deputy steps up, puts the butt of his rifle against the first bolt, and hits it hard. The sound is like thunder in the quiet cabin, bouncing off the walls. The bolt comes out with a loud grinding sound of metal on metal. Callum goes to the second bolt, hits it, and it breaks. The third bolt is rusty and needs 2 hits. The sound echoes through the floor and up into the rafters. When the last bolt comes loose, a thick, foul-smelling wave of air rushes down from the darkness above. It smells like human waste, sickness, and despair so deep that it seems to have a smell of its own. Thorn steps back, puts his hand over his mouth, and tears up. Callum gags and turns his head, but he doesn't leave. There is a sound coming from the blackness above the open hatch. It's weak, fragile, and barely human. It is a whimper, the sound of something that has learned not to make noise and has been punished for breathing. Thorn pushes himself forward, holding on to the edge of the hatch frame, and yells into the dark. He says he works for the law. He says they are here to help. There is no answer. Just that same, weak, shaky whimper. Then there is another sound, like something moving in the dark, but not knowing how to get to the light. Callum lights a match and holds it up. The small flame lights up the edges of a ladder that goes up to the attic. Thorn climbs first, holding onto the ladder rungs with one hand and his revolver with the other. The smell gets stronger with each step, and when he gets his head above the attic floor, he sees them. 3 women, thin and pale like ghosts, blinking in the sudden light. There are deep, scarred grooves on their wrists from old restraints. There are 11 children behind them, huddled in the corners of the attic like broken dolls. Their bodies are twisted, and their eyes are wide and confused. The horror is out in the open now. It is there, undeniable, and looking back at him with the weight of decades. Thorn doesn't say anything. He can't. He just puts out his hand, and the oldest woman, whose hair is gray and tangled, reaches for him with fingers that shake like leaves in a storm. The attic is a grave for the living. Thorn's eyes get used to the dim light coming in through cracks in the roof boards, and the full horror becomes clear in bits and pieces, with each one being worse than the last. The 3 women sit on thin straw pallets, and their bones press against their skin like tent poles because they are so thin. Their hair is matted and dirty, and it hasn't been washed in what must be months or years. The oldest one, whose face is lined with pain that makes her look older than she is, she can't be more than 40, watches Thorn, with eyes that show no hope, only a dull understanding that something has changed. 3 sets of iron chains are bolted directly into the oak floorboards behind her. Each chain ends in worn leather cuffs that are darkened with old blood and sweat. The chains are long enough to let you move around in a space of about 10 feet, but not anymore. It's long enough to get to the slop bucket in the corner and take care of the kids who are hiding in the shadows, but not long enough to get to the bolted door. Callum climbs up behind Thorn, breathing quickly and shallowly. He now has a lantern, and when he lifts it, the light shows the walls. There are thousands of faint scratches all over one part of the attic. They look like tally marks carved into the wood with something sharp, like a nail or a piece of metal. The marks are in groups of 5, like how prisoners count days. They go from the floor to the ceiling in columns that show years, decades, and a lifetime of scratches. Thorn moves closer, and his hand shakes as he touches the wood. Some of the marks are smooth, as if someone has run their fingers over them over and over again, counting the days they were held captive. He thinks that there are more than 10,000 marks on this wall alone. 10,000 days. That's a long time. 27 years. The oldest woman has lived here since she was a child. Thorn turns back to the women and slowly kneels down, making sure to be gentle and careful with his movements. He tells them what his name is. He tells them they are safe now, but the words don't mean much in a place where safety has never been. The oldest woman doesn't say anything, but one of the younger ones, whose face is thin and whose eyes are unfocused, whispers something so softly that Thorn has to lean in to hear it. "It's Tuesday," she says. And Thorn doesn't get it at first. But then the oldest woman speaks. Her voice is rough and broken from not being used. She says the brothers have a plan. She says that Tuesday is her day. She says her brothers are always on time. The words hit Thorn like stones, and he realizes with a sickening clarity that this is not chaos or madness. This is a system that is set up and run with the cold efficiency of people who think they are doing God's work. Callum has gone to the attic's far corner, where a big cedar chest is under a small window. He yells at Thorn, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Inside the chest is a book wrapped in oilcloth. It's a huge, leather-bound ledger with a cracked spine from use and pages full of dense, careful handwriting. Thorn carefully lifts it and opens it to the first page. The title, which is written in an old-fashioned script, says, "The Blood Reckoning, a record of the Rodenbeck line that started in the year of our Lord, 1832. What follows is more than just genealogy. It's a manifesto. The family's sacred duty, as they see it, is to keep their bloodline pure and free from the corruption of outsiders." This is written about on page after page. Folding the blood back upon itself is a phrase that keeps coming up, and the way it's said makes Thorn's hands shake with religious fervor. The names of both parents, always siblings, and always Rodenbecks, are on each birth record. Thorn understands that the word flawed, crossed out with a single line of ink, means death. The ledger shows 6 generations of this practice, starting with Jedediah and Azubah. The text says that they had a vision from God telling them to leave the world and keep their line pure. Their kids kept doing it, their grandkids improved it, and the current generation, the 4 brothers and 3 sisters, have kept it going with the cold precision of men who think they are guardians of a holy covenant. Thorn discovers records for each of the 11 living children in the attic. These records include clinical details about their births, such as the dates, times, physical descriptions, and notes about how they grew up. In a separate column, the names of the children who died are listed, along with their ages at the time of death, which range from a few days to several years. 22 kids were born, and 11 lived. The numbers are written down without feeling or remorse, as if they were keeping track of animals. Callum has brought the women and children down from the attic one by one and moved them outside into the cold December air, where they blink in the daylight like animals coming out of a cave. Hezekiah and Jubal, 2 of the brothers, are in chains and sitting quietly on the porch. Their faces show no shame or anger, just a calm waiting. Silas and Malachi come in from the fields and are arrested without putting up a fight. They don't ask why. They don't protest. Silas just looks at Thorn and says, they haven't done anything wrong. They have followed the law that their blood and their God gave them. His voice is calm, steady, and completely devoid of emotion. Thorn tells Callum to ride to see Dr. Abram Galloway, the county doctor. He is a man of science and reputation who will give the court the medical evidence it needs. Thorn keeps writing down everything while they wait. The chains, the tally marks, the ledger, and the state of the attic. He measures things. He draws pictures. He gathers the iron cuffs and puts them in a canvas bag, noticing that the leather still has dried blood on it. 3 hours later, Dr. Galloway arrives and spends the rest of the day looking at the women and children. With each hour that passes, his face becomes more and more grim. He starts writing his report that night by lamplight. It will be 12 pages long and be the prosecution's most damaging piece of evidence. He writes in clinical, unflinching language about the ligature scars, malnutrition, signs of repeated trauma, and severe congenital deformities that all 11 children have. He says that these deformities are the clear signs of generational inbreeding. He calls the last part of his report a catalog of generational damnation, and signs his name with a steady hand. The proof is all there. There is no need to believe or testify against the Rodenbeck brothers. It is a fact that is clear and well documented. The Perry County Courthouse, a small brick building that has never seen a case this big, will host the trial of the Rodenbeck brothers on the 14th of March, 1891. There are a lot of people in the courtroom, but it's not a carnival atmosphere. The mood is somber, almost like a funeral, as if the whole community is on trial for how long it stayed quiet. Judge Whitfield is in charge. His face is like stone, and the sound of his gavel hitting the bench promises no mercy. The prosecution, led by a young lawyer named Harlan Pierce, who has been looking at the evidence for 3 months, starts with a statement that takes everyone's breath away. He tells the jury that they will see written and physical proof of a crime that is so systematic and long-lasting that it is hard to believe. He tells them that the oldest victim will testify and that her words will leave no doubt. He then takes the Rodenbeck ledger from the evidence table, holds it up over his head, and says, "This book is a confession written by men who thought they would never be judged." The prosecution's case goes on for 6 days, and each day it gets worse. Dr. Galloway is the first witness to speak. His 12-page report is shown as Exhibit A. He reads parts of it aloud in a calm, clinical voice, talking about the ligature scars on the sisters' wrists and ankles. The scars were so deep that they left permanent grooves in the flesh. He goes into great detail about the children's physical health, naming each birth defect with medical accuracy: cleft palates, fused fingers, spinal curvatures, and cognitive impairments so severe that some children can't speak or feed themselves. He says that these problems are the direct and predictable result of inbreeding over many generations, and that the pattern is so strong that it could only have been planned. Graham, the defense attorney who was appointed by the court and looks sick throughout the trial, tries to question the certainty of Galloway's conclusions. The doctor then shows a chart he made that compares the Rodenbeck children's deformities to documented medical cases of inbreeding in European royal families. There is no denying that they are alike. Graham sits down without asking any more questions. Next, the physical evidence is shown. The jury sees the iron chains, which still have blood on them, on a table. They pass the leather cuffs around, so they can feel how heavy they are and see how worn they are. Justice Thorne gets on the stand and talks in great detail about the moment the attic door was opened, the smell that came out, and the sight of 3 women who had been kept as breeding stock for decades. He shows his drawings of the attic, his measurements of the chains, and his pictures of the tally wall, which has 10,000 marks carved by a woman who was counting the days she was held captive. He reads aloud from his case notes, including the scary thing the youngest sister said. It was Tuesday, which was her scheduled day. The gallery is the only place where people are crying in the courtroom. After that, Thorne opens the Rodenbeck ledger and starts to read. He looks at the title page. He reads the entries that show how 6 generations of siblings paired up. He reads the parts that talk about the holy duty to keep the bloodline alive. He reads the list of 22 children who were born and 11 who lived, with each child marked as pure stock or flawed. When he is done, he closes the book and looks the jury in the eye. "This is not madness," he says. "This is methodology. This is evil written down." Tamar Rodenbeck is called to testify on the 7th day. With the help of a nurse, she walks into the courtroom. Her body is still weak, and she moves slowly and unsteadily. She takes an oath, and when the judge asks her to say her name, she does so in a voice so low that the judge tells her to speak up. She says it again, and then Harlan Pierce starts to ask his questions. He wants to know how old she was when the abuse started. She says 20. He wants to know who set up the system. Before they died, her parents, Jedediah and Azuba, told her and her sisters that it was God's will that they only have children with their brothers. They said that any other union would ruin the bloodline. He wants to know if the brothers made them do what they wanted. Yes, She says with chains, hunger, and the threat that if they didn't agree, the children who were already born would be taken into the woods and left. Her voice doesn't change. She has waited too long to speak up now. Pierce wants her to tell him what the schedule is. She says that each sister had a certain day, that the brothers switched days in a pattern they always followed, and that it was as orderly as a church service. Some of the jurors turn away and cover their mouths, but Tamar keeps talking. She says they could only leave the attic when they were pregnant and close to giving birth, and then only to the ground floor, never outside. She says she kept the tally marks to remind herself that she was still alive and still counting. The defense doesn't want to cross-examine Pierce when he's done. Griam says softly that he doesn't have any questions for this witness. The brothers get to defend themselves by testifying. Silas is the only one who talks. He stands up with the same calm, blank look on his face that he has had the whole time. He doesn't deny what happened. He doesn't say he didn't know or that he was forced to do it. Instead, he says in a calm voice that God chose his family to stay pure and not let the outside world corrupt them by keeping their blood clean. He says they followed the law that their ancestors gave them, which was higher than any court. He says that the children are gifts from God and that they came from holy unions. He says he has no regrets and would do it again if he could, because the only right thing to do is to follow God's will. When asked if he knows that his sisters are in pain, he stops for a moment and then says, "Suffering is the price of purity." The courtroom is full of noise. Judge Whitfield bangs his gavel over and over again to get everyone to be quiet, but it's too late. Silas has condemned himself by what he said. The jury talks about it for 53 minutes. They come back with a guilty verdict for all 4 brothers on all counts. Judge Whitfield gives Silas and Malachi the death penalty by hanging because they are the oldest and the ones who planned the abuse. The Frankfurt Penitentiary has sentenced Hezekiah and Jubal to life in prison. The brothers don't say anything. They are taken out of the courtroom without saying a word. On a cold October morning, 6 months later, Silas and Malachi are hanged in the yard of the prison. The county records say they died with the words, "Executions carried out as ordered by law." Hezekiah died of pneumonia in 1898. In 1901, Jubal dies in his cell. The cause of death is heart failure. The county pays for the 3 sisters and their 11 children to move to a private sanatorium in another state, where Dr. Galloway watches over them until he dies in 1906. No one ever knows where they are. A year after the trial, the Rodenbeck cabin is found burned to the ground. The fire was so bad that only the stone chimney is left. There is no investigation. The court ordered that the Rodenbeck ledger be sealed and put in the Kentucky State Archives, where it still is today. It is a reminder of how silence protects evil and justice reveals it. The case is over. The record is full, and the darkness that lived in Blackmar's Holler is gone for good.